Federal agents have just announced a major drug raid with dozens of arrests.
Investigators say this drug trafficking ring was so huge it was making millions of dollars every month.
These indictments charge the trafficking cells that enabled the cartels to traffic the illicit drugs across the border. So we do believe that we've impacted their operations by taking out the transportation cells.
At 4:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the largest coordinated strike against a narco state in Western Hemisphere history began. Caracas, Venezuela, 35 tons of pure cocaine and methamphetamine seized. A presidential bunker breach that a regime exposed. And the United States military, FBI, and DEA just proved that no fortress is untouchable when corruption meets command-level collusion with the world's most violent drug cartels. This is not diplomacy. This is not negotiation. This is eradication. And what they found beneath the capital will rewrite everything you thought you knew about how deep cartel power can go when it wears a government uniform. The operation involved over 1,500 federal agents, U.S. Navy warships, B-52 bombers, Delta Force commandos, and cyber warfare units working in perfect synchronization. They called it Operation Fortress Serpent. And by the time the sun rose over the Caribbean, the most protected narco-state stronghold in South America had been torn open, exposing a criminal network so vast it stretched from the presidential palace in Caracas to the streets of Los Angeles, Miami, and New York City. Stay with me, because the next part is worse. The night sky over Caracas was thick with storm clouds and the hum of distant engines. No thunder, just a low, steady vibration of something approaching. At exactly 4:32 a.m., 3 Black Hawk helicopters crossed into Venezuelan airspace, flanked by F-15 fighter jets maintaining a high-altitude security perimeter. The jets were not there to strike. They were there to dominate the sky, to ensure no Venezuelan military aircraft could interfere, and send an unmistakable message to anyone watching from the ground. We own this airspace now. On the ground, FBI hostage rescue teams, DEA special response units, ICE tactical operators, and U.S. Army Delta Force commandos moved to pre-dawn darkness like shadows with a single directive: breach the bunker, secure the vault, arrest everyone inside. The target was a reinforced underground complex located directly beneath the Miraflores presidential palace. Hidden under layers of concrete, steel, and decades of denial, intelligence had tracked this location for 9 months. Encrypted cartel communications intercepted by NSA cyber units. Satellite thermal imaging showing unusual heat signatures below ground that indicated large-scale activity inconsistent with normal government operations. Financial records linking shell companies in Panama, the Cayman Islands, and Miami to a single digital signature tied to President Nicolas Maduro himself. And testimony from a former Venezuelan military officer who defected to the United States and provided detailed blueprints of the bunker, including entry points, security protocols, and a location of the vault where narcotics and cash were stored. The breach began with controlled demolition charges placed at 3 separate entry points by Navy SEAL demolition experts. Flashbangs detonated in sequence, sending shockwaves through corridors lined with surveillance cameras that went black in seconds as cyber warfare operators remotely disabled the entire security grid. SWAT teams poured in, weapons raised, night vision goggles scanning every corner. Shouts in Spanish. Hands up, down on the ground. No one moves. The first wave hit a security checkpoint manned by armed guards wearing Venezuelan military uniforms, but carrying cartel-issued AK-47s and AR-15s with custom engravings. They surrender without firing a shot. Smart choice. Beyond the checkpoint, agents entered a cavernous storage facility that looked more like a narcotics warehouse than a government installation. The air was thick with the chemical smell of processed cocaine. Stacks of cocaine bricks wrapped in industrial plastic, each stamped with cartel insignias from the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG, rose from floor to ceiling. Pallets of crystal methamphetamine in sealed bags, ready for distribution across Central America, the Caribbean, and into the southern United States, filled an entire section of the vault. 35 tons. Not kilos. Tons. Enough fentanyl precursors and base narcotics to poison millions. Enough cocaine to flood every major city, from Bogota to Boston for months. Enough methamphetamine to supply cartel distribution cells across Texas, California, Arizona, and Nevada without interruption. But the drugs were only the beginning. In a sealed vault at the far end of the bunker, agents found something that turned this raid into a full-scale federal investigation with international implications. Encrypted hard drives stacked in fireproof safes. Digital ledgers with transaction logs dating back 7 years, detailing every shipment, every payment, and every corrupt official involved in the operation. Steel lockboxes containing handwritten orders, signed authorizations, and communication logs between cartel leaders and senior Venezuelan government officials, including cabinet ministers and military commanders. And sitting at the center of it all, a reinforced server farm still running, streaming live data to offshore accounts and cartel command centers across the Americas. One DEA agent knelt down beside the servers, watching lines of encrypted code scroll across the screen, and turned to his team leader. This isn't a stash house. This is command and control. Another agent photographed a whiteboard covered in shipping routes, port schedules, and cartel cell phone numbers. A third found a locked briefcase containing over $2 million in cash, vacuum sealed in plastic bricks, and stamped with cartel logos. The raid lasted 43 minutes. By the time the sun broke over the Avila Mountains in the north, the bunker was secure, the evidence was being cataloged, and federal agents were already transmitting encrypted intelligence reports into a Venezuelan government bank account, and then out again to purchase a private jet registered to a fake agricultural export firm. The jet was used to transport cartel leadership and high values. At the top of the network, one name appeared over and over again in the transaction logs: cartel convoy routes and the construction of drug tunnels running from Venezuelan ports to cartel-controlled zones in Central America. He wasn't just turning a blind eye. He was the shield cartel operations, military resources to protect drug convoys, and diplomatic immunity to move cartel leaders and narcotics across international borders without detection. The Venezuelan National Guard wasn't protecting the people. It was protecting running a nation. It was running a cartel empire. Analysts discovered that Maduro had personally signed off on construction of at least 14 drug tunnels connecting Venezuelan ports to cartel distribution hubs in Colombia and Panama. He had authorized the use of Venezuelan military aircraft to transport cocaine shipments to Central America to Europe without being detained. And he had ordered Venezuelan intelligence services to spy on DEA agents, FBI informants, and anti-cartel activists, providing that information directly to cartel hit squads. This is not corruption. This is command-level collusion. This is not negligence. This is engineered treason. And the operation to dismantle it had just begun. One senior FBI analyst stood up from her workstation, looked at the evidence wall covered in cartel organizational charts, financial flow charts, and photographs of corrupt officials, and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. This is a narco-state, not a government infiltrated by cartels. 10 a.m., inside a Joint Task Force Command Center aboard the USS George Washington Station off the Venezuelan coast, a digital map of South America lit up with over 60 red fortress, a tunnel system, a corrupt official, or a government facility compromised by narco-state operations. The mission was clear: synchronized eradication. Over 12 Delta Force commandos and Air Force reconnaissance units deployed across the region in the largest multi-nation drug enforcement operation ever conducted in the Western Hemisphere. Black Hawk helicopters lifted off from mobile command bases established on U.S. Navy warships. B-52 bombers circled high above, not to strike, but to send a message. Jets could scramble to interfere with the operation. U.S. Navy destroyers positioned themselves off the coast, their radar system scanning for any attempt by cartel operatives to flee by sea. And on the ground, armored convoys carrying federal agents and military operators rolled toward their targets with precision timing. At 6:47 a.m., the raids began. In Maracaibo, Venezuela, DEA agents and U.S. military operators stormed a cartel superlab hidden inside an abandoned oil refinery on the outskirts of the city, seizing 4,000 kilograms of cocaine, industrial pill presses producing fake oxycodone laced with fentanyl. The lab had been operating for 3 years without a single raid, protected by corrupt local police who received monthly payments to ignore reports of chemical smells and heavy truck traffic. In Puerto Cabello, ICE tactical teams breached a shipping warehouse where cartel members were loading narcotics into cargo, containers labeled as agricultural exports, destined for ports in the Dominican Republic and eventually Miami. Agents found 6 tons of cocaine hidden inside bags of coffee beans, 3 tons of methamphetamine concealed in barrels of crude oil, and false-bottom shipping crates designed to pass X-ray inspections. In the mountains near the Colombian border, Delta Force operators discovered a network of drug tunnels stretching over 12 miles, complete with electric lighting, ventilation systems, and rail carts used to move tons of cocaine and methamphetamine undetected. The tunnels were sophisticated, reinforced with steel beams, and equipped with communication cables that allowed cartel operators on both sides of the border to coordinate shipments in real time. And in downtown Caracas, FBI agents arrested 3 senior Venezuelan military generals, 2 Supreme Court justices, and a deputy minister of Interior Affairs, all directly linked to cartel payroll and logistics coordination. One of the generals had over $40 million in offshore accounts. One of the justices had dismissed over 200 cartel-related criminal cases in exchange for cash payments delivered to his home in armored vehicles. And the deputy minister had personally coordinated the transportation of cartel leaders using government motorcades and diplomatic vehicles. By noon, the numbers were staggering. 63 cartel members captured, 17 corrupt government officials arrested, 8 drug superlabs destroyed, 92 tons of narcotics seized across all sites combined, $430 million in cash and assets frozen, over 200 weapons confiscated, including machine guns, grenade launchers, and anti-aircraft missiles. The underworld took more damage in 6 hours than it had in the last 6 years. But the most devastating blow wasn't the drugs or the money. It was what the raid exposed about how deeply the cartel had infiltrated the government itself. Inside a secure FBI evidence analysis facility in Miami, investigators were reviewing the seized hard drives, patrol logs, military dispatch records, and internal government emails recovered from the bunker. And what they found was chilling. Over 200 Venezuelan National Guard officers were on cartel payroll, receiving monthly payment of up to $50,000 each in exchange for looking the other way during drug shipments. Border patrol schedules have been falsified to create gaps timed perfectly with drug convoy movements, allowing trucks loaded with cocaine and methamphetamine to cross checkpoints without inspection. Arrest warrants for cartel leaders have been buried or dismissed by judges who receive monthly cash payments laundered through real estate firms and offshore accounts. And internal communications showed that senior military commanders have been coordinating directly with CJNG and Sinaloa cartel leadership to ensure safe passage for human trafficking operations and migrant smuggling routes used as cover for narcotic shipments. One email, sent from a Venezuelan general to a cartel lieutenant, read simply, "Convoy clear for Thursday 3 a.m. Route 7. No checkpoints." Another message, from a Supreme Court justice to a cartel accountant, confirmed the dismissal of 15 criminal cases in exchange for a $2 million payment. One DEA analyst said it best. They didn't infiltrate the system. They became the system. Honest officers within the Venezuelan military who had tried to report corruption were either reassigned to remote outposts, intimidated by cartel-linked colleagues, or disappeared entirely. Whistleblowers inside the government were silenced through threats, bribery, or violence. And anyone who questioned the flow of narcotics through state-controlled ports was removed from their position within weeks, often under false accusations of incompetence or disloyalty. Federal agents began arresting high-ranking officials who had operated as a second secret police force, protecting cartel operations instead of stopping them. Deputy police chiefs who had leaked raid schedules to cartel cells. Border security commanders who had coordinated convoy routes with cartel logistics planners. Regional intelligence officers who had provided cartel hit squads with the names and addresses of anti-drug activists and journalists. All of them bought, all of them complicit, and all of them part of a parallel enforcement system designed not to serve justice, but to shield the drug empire. One FBI director stood in front of the evidence wall covered in names, photos, and transaction records and spoke to the team with cold clarity. This is not a government. This is a cartel with a flag. And now, the badge in the system would be rebuilt from the ground up. Federal prosecutors began preparing indictments for over 300 individuals, including cabinet ministers, military generals, judges, legislators, and cartel operatives. Extradition requests were filed with international courts. Asset forfeiture proceedings targeted billions of dollars in real estate, luxury vehicles, private jets, and offshore bank accounts. And intelligence analysts continue to trace the network outward, following every financial thread, every encrypted communication, and every corrupted official until the entire empire was mapped and exposed. But the scope of Operation Fortress Serpent didn't end at Venezuela's borders. As cyber forensics teams dug deeper into the encrypted network, they discovered that Maduro's narco-state had extended its reach across the entire continent and beyond. Shipping routes connected Venezuelan ports to cartel distribution hubs in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, and the Caribbean islands. Fake logistics companies transported narcotics hidden inside coffee shipments, crude oil barrels, construction materials, and even humanitarian aid packages, moving through Central America and into Texas, Arizona, California, and Florida without triggering alerts. Migrant smuggling operations served as perfect cover for cartel activities. Caravans organized by cartel control coordinators move thousands of people northward while embedding narcotics, weapons, and cartel operatives within the flow, making interdiction nearly impossible without separating innocent families from criminals. Human trafficking networks operating under the guise of humanitarian aid transported women and children through cartel control corridors, generating millions in revenue, while federal agencies struggled to untangle legitimate refugees from exploited victims. Financial analysts estimated that the Maduro network moved an average of 18 tons of cocaine per week across the Americas using falsified shipping manifests, bribed port inspectors, and cartel control way stations that shut down for maintenance whenever convoys needed to pass undetected. One shipping manifest showed a cargo container labeled as agricultural machinery traveling from Venezuela to Panama, then to Mexico, and finally to a warehouse in Los Angeles. Inside that container, customs agents later found 3 tons of cocaine concealed in false compartments welded into machinery frames. Another manifest documented a crude oil shipment from a Venezuelan state-owned refinery to a buyer in the Dominican Republic. That shipment contained methamphetamine sealed in waterproof packages and submerged in the oil tanks. And in the final encrypted file, recovered from the bunker, investigators found a document that made their blood run cold. It was titled Phase 3, Continental Integration. The plan was detailed, methodical, and terrifying in its ambition. Turn Venezuela into the permanent headquarters for a unified cartel coalition, merging Sinaloa, CJNG, and regional trafficking organizations into a single narco-state command structure with centralized leadership, shared logistics, and combined military resources. Use government infrastructure to build impenetrable logistics networks that could move narcotics, weapons, and people across borders without detection. Expand operations into every major port city in the Western Hemisphere, establishing cartel cells in Miami, Houston, Los Angeles, New York, Toronto, and Sao Paulo. And create a shadow government strong enough to resist U.S. intervention indefinitely by leveraging diplomatic relationships, international corruption, and military alliances with nations hostile to American interests. One intelligence officer read the document twice, then looked up at his colleagues and said out loud, they weren't just running drugs. They were building an empire. An empire designed to last decades. An empire protected by diplomatic immunity, international corruption, and the resources of an entire nation-state. An empire that treated nations like client states, borders like business opportunities, and human lives like inventory. The plan included provisions for cartel-controlled banking systems, cartel-operated port facilities, and even cartel-run agricultural programs designed to provide cover for cocaine and opium production. It described strategies for infiltrating law enforcement agencies in neighboring countries, bribing legislators to pass favorable trade laws, and using humanitarian crises as cover for smuggling operations. And it outlined a vision for the future in which the cartel didn't just operate alongside governments. It became the government. If Operation Fortress Serpent hadn't happened when it did, if the intelligence hadn't been gathered, if the raid hadn't succeeded, that empire might become unstoppable. Power does not always need open violence. Sometimes it only needs silence and ambition. For 7 years, Nicolas Maduro and his cartel partners built a narco-state hidden in plain sight, shielded by government authority, diplomatic immunity, and international indifference. They poisoned communities with fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine. They destroyed families, ended lives, and turned entire neighborhoods into war zones where children grew up hearing gunfire instead of laughter. They trafficked human beings like cargo, treating men, women, and children as commodities to be bought, sold, and discarded. They smuggled migrants as cover for narcotics, exploiting desperation and suffering for profit. And they did it all while wearing suits, sitting in palaces, giving speeches about sovereignty and independence, and pretending to govern. But at 4:47 a.m. on that dark morning in Caracas, the fortress fell. 35 tons of narcotics seized in a single raid. Billions in cartel assets frozen across multiple countries. Hundreds of corrupt officials exposed and arrested, and a narco-state torn apart from the inside out by federal agents who refuse to look away. This story is a warning. It shows what happens when ambition meets corruption, and when greed wears the mask of authority. It shows that cartels do not just operate in the shadows, hiding in jungles and back alleys. They infiltrate governments, rewrite laws, control borders, and turn entire nations into fortresses for their empires. It shows that the most dangerous criminals are not always the ones with guns in their hands. Sometimes they're the ones with pens in their hands, signing documents that enable mass murder, human trafficking, and the destruction of communities across continents. And it shows that no bunker is deep enough. No regime is untouchable, and no narco-state is safe when justice decides to move. When the FBI, DEA, IC, U.S. Navy, U.S. Army, and Delta Force coordinate their efforts, when intelligence agencies share information, when nations cooperate against a common enemy, the cartels lose, the corrupt officials lose, and the people who suffered in silence finally see justice delivered. If you're still watching, tap like so more people see this story. Comment expose. If you want corruption like this dragged into the light where it cannot hide, share this video if you believe the truth matters more than silence and that accountability must reach the highest levels of power. And subscribe, because this is not the last time we will show you how deep the cartels really go, how far their influence extends, and how hard federal agencies are working to dismantle their empires piece by piece. Remember, this is a fictional dramatization created to illustrate the dangers of political infiltration, organized crime, and the erosion of democratic institutions when corruption is allowed to flourish unchecked. But the warning is real, the threat is real, and the cost of looking away is measured in lives lost, communities destroyed, democracies corrupted from within, and futures stolen from generations of children who deserve better. Stay vigilant, stay informed, question authority when it operates in the shadows. Demand transparency from your leaders, and never forget that power left unchecked, power protected by silence, power shielded by complicity, will always serve itself, not the people it pretend to protect. The raid in Caracas was not just about seizing drugs. It was about sending a message to every corrupt official, every cartel leader, every trafficker who believes they are untouchable because of their position, their wealth, or their connections. You are not safe. Justice is patient. Justice is thorough. And when justice arrives, it does not knock on the door, it breaks it down.